Hello and welcome to Global Business as we bring you the latest developments in the business world. From Nairobi to Johannesburg, from Cairo to Lagos, we'll be bringing you entrepreneurs that are making business headlines. I am Penina Karibe in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. It's 9 p.m. here in East Africa, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to the show. Coming up tonight, World Bank President Jim Yong Kim proposes a global fund to help contain the deadly virus. Kenyan tea farmers contemplate uprooting crop as prices plummet. And later on, we meet an entrepreneur out to solve South Africa's malnutrition problem. World Bank President Jim Yong Kim has proposed the setting up of a global fund to help contain the spread of Ebola. Speaking in the Australian city of Brisbane ahead of the weekend G20 summit, Kim said that the proposed fund would also provide an incentive for drug companies to develop vaccines and treatments to fight future pandemics. Kim, a doctor and anthropologist, is the first public health expert to lead the World Bank.
This is not money that you would put into a fund. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is almost like an insurance policy, that when the World Health Organization declared a global health emergency, when they invoked what's called the international health regulations, then and only then would this fund disperse. And you could raise those funds on the international bond markets and then pay them back over a longer period of time. This is something that we do all the time anyway inside the World Bank Group, and it's a way of utilizing all of our technical capacity to help provide a buffer, a virtual buffer for the global economy and for poor countries that don't have sufficient public health infrastructure should an epidemic break out.
Earlier, the International Monetary Fund called more financial support to combat the epidemic on fears that it may not have been contained by the first half of 2015 as earlier projected. The Bretton Woods institution is considering debt relief for the three most affected countries, which are Guinea, Liberia and Sierra Leone.
We're very glad that some donors have expressed an interest in increasing support for the Ebola-affected countries. We are reaching out to all donors to see how we might be able to take this forward together with our executive board, using all the tools available to us. This would be additional, of course, to the $130 million in immediate support from the IMF that was already provided interest-free to Guinea, Liberia. The IMF staff's previous projections were assuming that the epidemic would be brought under control by the first quarter of 2015. However, it now appears that it could be well into the second half of 2015 before the Ebola outbreak is brought under control in the three affected countries. As a result, the economic outlook for these countries is now worse than envisaged at the time of the recent additional IMF support, and significant financing gaps are emerging for 2015. Further budget support through bilateral and multilateral donors, preferably in grant form, will be needed.
Kenya's tea production has seen a bumper year, though it has not helped farmers because world prices have dipped. Critics of the industry also complain that little has been done to market Kenya's high-quality black tea and encourage more diverse tea crops. The government, however, says that it is trying to improve policies and cushion price falls.
The bushes of tea that blanket the rolling hills of Kenya's Nandi County, about 300 kilometers northwest of Nairobi. Hundreds of thousands of farmers and tea pickers have earned a living here for generations. Night Kerubo and her husband pick tea here to support their 5 children, but the 26-year-old says she's worried about her job security because some farmers are threatening to abandon the crop altogether and move to more lucrative ones instead.
It is definitely going to affect my life because if I uproot this crop, where am I going to earn my living? This is our work. There is no other job for us. This is the only thing available, so if it stopped, we'll be doomed.
Many small-scale farmers here have long relied on harvesting tea bushes in Nandi, helping make Kenya one of the world's biggest tea exporters. But ideal weather and big harvests, instead of producing bumper earnings, have led to a glut of Kenya's specialty black tea. Farmers now earn 40% less for each kilogram of tea sold than they did 3 years ago, and some are considering venturing into real estate for rental income.
This tea crop, to be honest, has become useless because the price has gone down, fertilizer prices have shot up, and pesticide prices have gone up. Now we are deciding to uproot this crop and keep cattle or grow maize because it's useless and we have kids in schools. Sustenance comes from this tea, clothes come from the tea, taking kids to school is tea, but now the prices are down.
Such a threat could spell broader trouble for the East African nation's economy. Once uprooted, returning to tea is a long process because a bush only fully matures after 7 years. Last year, Kenya made up to $1.3 billion from tea, while production jumped to a record 432 million kilograms, a 17% jump from a year earlier and up 48% over a decade. That made it among Kenya's top foreign exchange earners, having overtaken tourism after a spate of attacks by extremist groups led to a steep drop in visitors. Tea prices have been under pressure globally as output and exports from other producers aside from Kenya have risen.
Unfortunately, and I know you've been visiting recently into the tea areas, the doom and gloom is justified. I don't see a big bounce happening anytime soon. And I think until we reduce supply, in effect, we are pricing our tea too low. We have to reduce the supply in order to get higher prices.
Overall, farmers received 32 shillings, just about 35 US cents per kilogram in the 2013-2014 season, down from 55 US cents in the 2011-2012 season.
The government should look for more markets abroad. The government should abolish tax, because if they add the luggage to a donkey which is already burdened, then we are finished. So we don't see why we should be having tea in the first place. And if I grow my managu, I don't pay tax. I just take them to the market and sell it and come back with my money.
To help farmers, the country's Tea Development Authority has asked the government to simplify a list of 24 taxes said to affect growers, including scrapping a 1% tax on exports introduced last year. Peter Wakaba, CCTV.
All right, so let's have a quick look at the markets now. And we saw a splash of green in both the Nigerian all-share Nairobi 20-share indices. The JSE, though, dipped by slightly over 0.25%, while the EGX, as always on Fridays, was closed for prayers. Still ahead here on Global Bees, we'll be talking to the Executive Secretary of the African Capacity Building Foundation on Africa's skills shortage. And Uganda takes on the world with its first locally manufactured car, albeit with startup hitches. Welcome back to Global Bees. The Executive Secretary of the African Capacity Development Foundation, Professor Emmanuel Ndozie, has just concluded a 3-day official visit to Kenya. In those 3 days, he has met with senior government officials, partners and representatives of ACBF-supported institutes in the East African country. ACBF aims at building sustainable human and institutional capacity for sustainable growth, poverty reduction and economic transformation in Africa. Being the host of many international organizations with regional focus, Kenya is among the highest recipients of ACBF grants and has so far received $43.4 million. Now, Professor Emmanuel Ndozie, the Executive Secretary of the African Capacity Building Foundation, now joins us in studio for further discussion on this. Prof, thank you for joining us. You've been in the country for 3 days and you've managed to meet with top policy makers. What was the thrust of the discussions you had with them?
Well, I was able to meet the Minister of Finance, as the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury, as well as the Central Bank Governor and other high-ranking officials. I was also able to meet with the leadership of the African Economic Research Consortium, ARC, and KIPRA, which is the Kenya Institute for Public Policy Research, as well as other important people. And the most important thing was for me to see for myself the impact of the projects that we have in Kenya on the capacity development agenda of Kenya and how that can help to improve the economic and social conditions in the country. And I was also able to discuss further on the initiatives the government is taking both at the national and the sub-national levels, and to see how best that we can work again with the Kenyan government to support capacity development in Kenya. Now,
Kenya's middle-term plan is that the country attains an overall GDP growth rate of 10% by 2017, and that's just in 3 years. The country, however, is grappling with challenges such as insecurity. We've got the Al-Shabaab threat, we have drought, we have a high recurrent budget. So how is it going to achieve this?
Well, if you're a development activist and expert like me, it's very important for you to recognize that the most important thing in development is to understand that we have to bring about development in spite of all the challenges. We cannot say that we have to wait until we have an ideal situation, because that doesn't exist anywhere. So regardless of all these challenges that you're facing, I think Kenyan economy has done pretty well. And there's room for it to even do better than it's doing if some of the policy issues are handled and some of the issues that you mentioned. But the country has to continue on the path that it is doing to, first of all, design the right kinds of policies to tackle the specific issues you mentioned, including macroeconomic policies. But secondly, also to ensure that these policies are fully implemented, and then monitor what is going on, and in order to learn the lessons and try to improve upon it. But more importantly, making sure that you have the capacity to really deliver on what is going on. And this capacity development is not just in the public sector, it is also in the private sector as well.
Right.
Because for you to bring about structural transformation or manufacturing and create millions of jobs for the young Kenyans, you really need to improve their skills so that they become employable, and you need to strengthen the business environment so that the businesses can also thrive.
And speaking of policies, Africa has suffered brain drain. But now, though, we're hearing talk of reverse brain drain, more Africans coming back to the continent to get involved with the Africa Rising story. But does the continent have sufficient policies to attract these brains and keep them here?
Unfortunately, the answer is no, and that is really regrettable. Many countries in the world have embarked upon this kinds of policy that's oriented towards either deliberately exporting your brain and re-importing them back, or tapping into your diaspora that's already out there so that they can bring back their intellectual and financial capital and resources to help to develop the countries. You can start from Japan to China recently, and India. I mean, they've been doing that. All the revolutions are seen in the technical and IT areas, but mostly because the Chinese government, for example, had a policy that was deliberate to really attract thousands of the best Chinese brains that they have out there to help them to launch into any sector that they wanted to dominate. And so I'm encouraging African governments to do the same, because you see all kinds of issues that result from that. the governments spend a lot of money building this capacity only to export it to the countries where they are even least needed. Part of the problem you see happening in the Ebola crisis today is not because Liberia doesn't have doctors, but the majority of them are in the United States. They have thousands and thousands of nurses in the United States who could be contributing to the healthcare delivery in Liberia. But the same thing goes along when you think about other areas. But the most important thing is when you lose your capacity, when there's a brain drain, it doesn't necessarily need to be a complete loss to the country.
Right.
As long as you have a strategy for either recirculating the brain or making sure that you recover them or make them return. But you need a strategy and set the conditions that will be appropriate for that. And ACBF is in the process of helping some countries, such as Ghana, to establish some strategies for really attracting back this brain that has been lost elsewhere.
Well, you've brought up the issue of Ebola, so let's talk a little bit about that crisis.
Yes.
We've heard from the IMF that they are considering debt relief for the 3 countries, which is obviously good news in order to help these battered economies. But what is your organization doing, or how else is your organization helping these economies?
No, first of all, I think the most important thing that was needed when the crisis broke was to express an unwavering spirit of solidarity. And I personally wrote to the leadership of these countries to say that we're all standing with you when Liberia or Sierra Leone or Guinea suffers, the rest of the continent suffers. And so that's number one. Number two is we immediately mobilize our network of think tanks to begin to reflect on why did this disease spread in those countries, and why were countries like Nigeria and Senegal were able to contain it. Are there lessons for those countries who are at risk? And in other words, what can be done in addition to what are the impacts? Because often people just simply look at it as a disease or medical issue, but it is more than that. It has significant social and economic consequences for the countries, and therefore we wanted to understand this very well, which will help the response that everybody else is giving. And then in the course of doing this, we found out that often the coordination capacity is very weak. The capacity for mobilization and information sharing among the communities, at least grassroots level, was also a challenge. So that people actually know exactly what to do and how to address the challenge. And so we have joined forces with other organizations, the UN and then the African Union Commission, to see how we can support these countries now. But for ACBF, our work will actually begin once Ebola is over, because we have to rebuild the capacity that has been lost, or that really wasn't there, which meant the disease to become such a pandemic. And we're talking about public health systems, and we're also talking about the issues I mentioned that will enable the public service to be able to respond effectively to such kinds of things. So we will first of all conduct some capacity needs assessment in these 3 countries, so that we know what we're dealing with. And this will enable every supporter, every practitioner to come in and see how they can support those 3 countries. All
right, Prof. Thank you very much for talking to us here on Global Business. We had in studio Professor Emmanuel Ndozie, the Executive Secretary of this African Capacity Building Foundation. Well, it's been a big day for the continent's homegrown motor industry. The official launch of East Africa's first locally manufactured hybrid car, branded the Smart. The car is a partnership between the Ugandan government and some very gifted students. CCTV's Voldy Carols with the story that makes our What's Hot segment for the day.
This wasn't the original plan. The Kira EV Smack was supposed to be launched with much fanfare, but it clearly still has some issues to iron out. There's no denying the passion of the team behind it, however, Uganda's state-owned Kira Corporation and some school students. Together, they helped build the region's first electric car, the Kira EV. Now they've decided to let loose a hybrid version running on electricity and petrol. They're hoping to start mass production in 4 years.
The government of Uganda has provided seed funding to kickstart the project, so far to a tune of $70 million. The entire project for the commercial production of the Smart in Uganda is estimated at a tune of $350 million.
For Kira, it's not just about making motoring history, it's about creating jobs in a sector that currently doesn't exist in Uganda. Already, 100 acres has been set aside for the construction of a plant, with a target of producing 850 cars a month in its first year.
We definitely need the cars, but also as we give ourselves the cars, how can we also ensure that our people have the jobs? That is very important for any country. Jobs. When you have people not working trouble, when you have people not working meaningfully, even if they're working trouble.
Musa Sisi explains how the SMAC will function once the glitches are sorted out.
So the engineers can do the plug-in and all that, but it does not have the end-user plug-in capabilities. It was designed to be self-reliant, mindful of the fact that within our communities, people are moving all the time, so if they are going to be stationed somewhere waiting for the car to charge, it may not be delivering the appropriate user experience. That's why we did not design a plug-in hybrid. We designed a hybrid self-reliant vehicle where the engine will charge the battery if triggered to do so.
A work in progress, yes, but the SMAC could yet make its presence felt.
Its top speed is 120 kilometers an hour, and the price tag isn't particularly racy either. At $30,000 US, it's $6,000 more expensive than the best-known hybrid, the Toyota Prius. But its makers are convinced they're on the road to success. Valdi Carolsa, CCTV, Nairobi, Kenya.
All right, so let's check on the commodities now. And oil rose to $79 a barrel on Friday, having earlier hit a 4-year low, supported by speculation that the prospect of even lower prices may nudge OPEC producers towards cutting output at a meeting in 2 weeks. Now, the International Energy Agency, which usually refrains from predicting oil prices, said in its monthly report that prices could fall further in 2015, and pressure was building on OPEC to cut supply. Coming up, Health for Wealth, we meet an entrepreneur who's out to solve South Africa's malnutrition problem. You're watching Global Biz. Welcome back. Malnutrition is a tough challenge for the South African government. According to the UN Children's Emergency Fund, it is the cause of death among 65% of children under the age of 5 in the country. Entrepreneur Mandla Shabalala is taking up the challenge. We feature her in our grassroots segment tonight. She's developed a porridge to ensure a proper diet and is trying to make it available to all young children.
My name is Mandla Shabalala. I'm the MD of Masana Dietitians. I have a dietetics background, so I'm a dietitian, and it came naturally to me once I saw the stats regarding malnutrition in our country, especially in the whole of SADC. And I felt that as a dietitian, I ought to do something about the crisis that we're currently facing. I mean, 1 in 3 kids faces a chance of dying under the age of 5 years. So honestly, that I felt compelled to do something. That's why I came up with this concept of manufacturing nutritional products while in the long term trying to empower and educate people about healthy living and nutrition and what it can do for a person. Masana instant porridge. It's naturally lactose and gluten-free, so for all those allergies and lactose intolerance, I chose the type of vitamins that I have, which include all the antioxidants. It includes all the key minerals, including selenium, zinc, and iron. We know those ones. So we have included that and put in a percentage that will actually give you an effect. For example, we've got the 10-day effect. So we promise you through 80% of the vitamins that we have given you, if you eat it for 10 consecutive days as a breakfast supplement, you are going to see a change. That is why we chose the type of substrate that we chose, being maize. Maize, you go anywhere. You go to Zim, Sadza, you go to Africa, there's pap, there's mtoho. We have all sorts of names, but basically, fundamentally, it's one thing. It's just maize. Our 500 grams currently retails for $2. 500 grams has got 10 servings inside. So for 10 days, you can have healthy nutrition. The Small Medium Enterprise Development Agency assisted us in getting it fit for human consumption through SABS. But otherwise, the marketing, the actual manufacturing of the product, everything else, we've been funding it from our own pockets. Our business model really is focusing on empowering the community. When we get to an area, we find someone who's driven to succeed, who's not shy to sell, who speaks well and can articulate themselves and has a bit of background with nutrition. We empower them and we give them stock and they go and sell in their communities. Because you know, a child's intelligence is mainly dependent on the type of food that they eat. So that is why we focus on that, because we can change the outcome or the future outcome of those kids by just giving them healthy nutrition right at the beginning.
Check on the currencies now. The rand slipped against the dollar in early Friday trade as stronger than expected mining output failed to shield the South African currency from fears of a further slump in global commodity prices. China, which is the world's top commodities buyer and a key export destination for South Africa, is set to place tariffs on a range of imported raw materials as domestic growth continues to cool. In early trade today, the rand was 0.25% softer at 11.23 to the dollar. By close of day, it had gained very marginally, settling at 11.21 to the dollar. And that's it for this edition of Global Business. Remember, you can send your feedback to globalbusinessafrica@cctv.com. You can visit our Facebook page, CCTV Africa. You can also stay in touch with Global Business on Twitter using the handle @CCTV News Africa. I'm Penina Karibe. Thanks for watching and enjoy yourself during this weekend.